Captain Elias Morgan stood alone on the observation deck of his ship, the horizon's edge. The stars stretched out before him like scattered diamonds on black velvet. He was a man of 45 years, with gray streaks in his dark hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many difficult decisions. Behind him, the door slid open, and his first officer stepped through. Grace Holloway was 10 years younger than her captain, with sharp eyes and a mind that worked faster than most computers. She carried a data tablet in her hands, and her expression told Elias that the news was not good. "We received a transmission from the Galactic Council," she said. "They are summoning you to appear before them at Perpetual Accord Station." Elias turned slowly from the window. In 300 years of contact with alien species, no human had ever been called to stand before the Council. The 12 elder species who ruled the galaxy did not concern themselves with what they called juvenile races. Humanity was barely tolerated, restricted to their own solar system, forbidden from expanding or developing certain technologies. "Did they say why?" Elias asked. "No, but I think we both know." Elias nodded slowly. 6 months ago, his ship had responded to a distress signal from a mining colony on a distant moon. When they arrived, they found 3,000 members of the Korath species hiding in underground tunnels. The Korath were small beings, barely 4 feet tall, with gentle dispositions and no military capability. The Velanthi, one of the powerful elder species, had decided they wanted the mineral-rich moon for themselves. The Korath were being systematically exterminated. Elias had made a choice that day. He loaded every Korath survivor onto his ship and transported them to a neutral world where they could rebuild their lives. He knew it violated council law. He did it anyway. "Set a course for Perpetual Accord," he told Grace, "and assemble the senior staff. They deserve to know what we are facing." The Horizon's Edge was a large vessel by human standards, carrying a crew of 200. She was designed for exploration and diplomacy, not warfare. Her weapons were defensive at best. As the ship entered hyperspace, Elias gathered his officers in the conference room. Derek Simmons was the navigation officer, a young man from Texas who had joined the fleet straight out of school. Hannah Webb handled communications, a quiet woman with an extraordinary gift for languages. Samuel Price was the chief medical officer, an older man who had served with Elias for 15 years. Together with Grace, they formed the command team that Elias trusted with his life. "The council has summoned me," Elias began. "I believe it is because of the Korath rescue. I want you all to understand what this means." "They are going to punish you," Derek said. "For saving innocent lives, they're going to try. The council views the galaxy as their property to manage. The Velanthi wanted the Korath gone, and we interfered with that plan." Hannah leaned forward. "What will they do to us?" "I do not know. But I want to make one thing clear. This was my decision. If there is a way to protect the crew by taking full responsibility, I will do it." Grace shook her head firmly. "That is not how this works, Captain. We all knew what we were doing when we rescued those people. We all agreed it was right. We stand together." The others nodded their agreement. Elias felt a warmth in his chest despite the cold fear that had settled there. He had chosen his crew well. The journey to Perpetual Accord took 11 days. The station was located at the center of Council space, a place where all species could gather under the protection of ancient treaties. When the Horizon's Edge dropped out of hyperspace, Elias understood for the first time how small humanity really was. The station was the size of a moon. It glowed with lights from 1,000 different civilizations. Ships of every design imaginable moved around it like fish around a reef. And waiting for the human vessel was an escort of Velanthi warships, their black hulls gleaming with menace. "They're scanning us," Hannah reported. "Very thoroughly," Elias said. "We have nothing to hide." The escort guided them to a docking port on the lower section of the station. When the airlock opened, a group of armed Velanthi soldiers stood waiting. Their commander, a tall figure with clicking mandibles, gestured for Elias to follow. "You will come with us. Your crew will remain on your vessel." "I would like to bring a small team," Elias said calmly. As is customary for diplomatic proceedings, the Velanthi hesitated, then nodded curtly. "For only no weapons. Leah selected Grace, Samuel, and Hannah. They walked through corridors that seemed to breathe and shift around them. The station was ancient, built by species that had mastered technologies humanity could barely imagine. Every surface hummed with quiet power. The grand chamber was vast. The ceiling stretched so high it was lost in shadow. 12 thrones, arranged in a semicircle, held beings of incredible age and power. Some were physical creatures like the insectoid Volanthi. Others were energy beings, or collective consciousnesses, or things that human language had no words for. At the center sat High Arbiter Zyrthon, being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell. Zyrthon had ruled the council for longer than humanity had existed as a species. When it spoke, its voice resonated through the chamber like thunder. Captain Elias Morgan of the human vessel Horizon's Edge, you stand accused of violations against the Covenant of Species. You have transported refugees across protected space. You have interfered with the lawful actions of an elder species. You have defied the order that maintains peace in this galaxy. Elias stood straight. His small group of humans looked impossibly fragile among these ancient powers, but his voice did not waver. I would hear the specific charges before I respond. The charges are clear, Zyrthon continued. 6 months ago, you removed Korath survivors from a world designated for Volanthia expansion. This violated 17 articles of the Covenant. The penalty is severe. The Korath were being murdered, Elias said. I found children hiding in tunnels, starving and terrified. Was I supposed to leave them to die? You were supposed to respect the decisions of your betters. The Volanthi ambassador, Crixthal, stepped forward. The Korath were marked for absorption. Their fate was decided by this council. You had no right to interfere. Absorption, Elias repeated the word like it tasted bitter. You mean genocide? A murmur ran through the chamber. No one spoke to the council this way. The elder species exchanged glances that carried thousands of years of shared history and assumptions. Zyrthon's energy form flickered. You will surrender your vessel and crew for judgment. Humanity will pay reparations for your actions. Additional restrictions will be placed on your species. This is the will of the council. Elias looked at his small team. Grace stood firm beside him. Hannah's hands were steady. Samuel's face showed no fear. They had known this might happen. They had discussed it during the long journey here, no, Elias said. The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water. For a moment nothing moved. Then chaos erupted. The single word echoed through the grand chamber like a gunshot. Several of the council members rose from their thrones. The Volanthi soldiers surrounding the room raised their weapons. Crixtal's mandibles clicked rapidly in what could only be fury. You refused the council? Zyrthon's voice boomed across the vast space. No species has ever refused the council. Elias felt his heart pounding in his chest, but he kept his voice calm and steady. I refuse to participate in murder. I refuse to pretend that killing innocent people is acceptable because powerful beings have decided it should be so. Humanity did not reach for the stars to become accomplices to genocide. You are children, Crixtal hissed. Your species has existed for the blink of an eye. You understand nothing of the forces that govern this galaxy. I understand enough. I understand that the Korath did nothing wrong except live where you wanted to expand. I understand that 3,000 people, including hundreds of children, would have been slaughtered for the crime of existing. Grace stepped forward to stand beside her captain. We have all seen the evidence. The mass graves. The burned settlements. The recordings of Korath families begging for mercy that never came. The Korath were a failed species, Crixtal replied coldly. They contributed nothing to galactic civilization. Their removal was necessary for progress. Progress? Samuel spoke up, his medical training giving his words weight. I treated those survivors. I held children who had watched their parents die. I do not call that progress. I call it evil. Zyrthon raised a crystalline limb for silence. The chamber slowly quieted, though the tension remained thick enough to choke on. You speak of evil as if morality is simple. You have no concept of the scales we balance. For 50,000 years, this council has maintained order. Species rise and fall according to natural law. The strong guide, the weak follow. This is the way of the universe. It is a way, Elias replied. But it is not the only way, and it is not a way that humanity can accept, and humanity will face consequences. Xyarthon's form darkened. Your vessel will be impounded. Your crew will be detained, and your homeworld will receive new restrictions that will set your species back a century. Elias had known this moment would come. During the long journey to perpetual accord, he had prepared for it. He reached down and tapped a small device on his wrist, activating a signal that had been waiting for his command. Throughout the station, alarms began to sound. The council members turned to their personal displays, and what they saw caused even these ancient beings to pause. Crixthal let out a sound of pure rage. "What have you done?" Xyarthon demanded. "I took precautions," Elias said calmly. 17 human vessels have just entered this system. They are not warships. They are colony ships, research vessels, medical frigates, cargo haulers. Ordinary people who heard what might happen here and chose to come. Hannah stepped forward, her communication skills now serving a different purpose. Each of those ships is broadcasting a message on every frequency to every species in range. The message contains everything. The truth about the Korith. The truth about the Valanthia expansion. Documentation of 12 other species currently being absorbed under council sanction. Evidence of decisions made in this very chamber that the galaxy has never been allowed to see. You would not dare, Crixthal moved toward them. But Velanenthi soldiers blocked his path, uncertain of their orders in this unprecedented situation. "We already have," Grace said. "Right now, every young species in the galaxy is learning that they are not alone. Every civilization that has chafed under council restrictions is discovering that others share their concerns. The truth is out there, spreading at the speed of light." The chamber erupted into chaos again, but this time it was different. The council members were arguing among themselves. Elias could see fractures forming. Ancient alliances straining under the weight of exposed secrets. Xyarthon's form flickered violently. "This is an act of war." "No," Elias shook his head. "This is an act of truth. We have not attacked anyone. We have not threatened anyone. We have simply shared information that was being hidden from the galaxy. What happens next depends on you. You think 17 unarmed ships can stand against the might of the Council? I think the galaxy is bigger than this chamber. I think there are billions of beings out there who have been told their whole lives that the Council knows best, that the elder species are wise, that the system works. Now they are learning the truth. What you do with that truth will determine whether there is war." One of the other council members, a tall, willowy being called Sirithnel of the Quarium, rose from its throne. "Perhaps we should discuss this further before making threats. The situation has clearly become more complex than anticipated." "There is nothing to discuss," Crixthal snarled. "These humans have committed treason against galactic order. They must be destroyed as an example." "An example of what?" Sirithnel's bioluminescent patterns flickered. "That we cannot tolerate truth? That our power depends on keeping secrets? What message does that send to the species watching us right now?" Xyarthon seemed to consider this. "The Valanthi fleet will be summoned. Until then, the humans will be confined to quarters. This session is suspended." Guards moved forward to escort Elias and his team from the chamber. As they walked through the massive doors, Elias glanced back. The 12 thrones were surrounded by arguing figures. For the first time in 50,000 years, the council was divided. Their quarters were comfortable but clearly a prison. Guards stood outside the door. Their communications were monitored. But through the window, they could see the space around the station. And what they saw gave them hope. More ships were arriving. Not just the 17 human vessels, but others. Young species from across the sector, drawn by the broadcast, were gathering to witness what was happening. Most were small craft, barely armed, but they came anyway. They came because, for the first time in their histories, someone had dared to challenge the unchangeable.
"And we started something," Hannah said quietly.
"Whether it ends well or badly, we started something that cannot be stopped," Elias nodded. "Now we see how the galaxy responds. Now we learn whether we are alone in believing that some things are worth fighting for. Grace stood at the window, watching the gathering fleet. Whatever happens, I want you all to know that I have never been prouder to serve under any captain. What we did today was right. That has to count for something. Samuel joined her at the window. The Hippocratic Oath says, "First do no harm." But sometimes the greatest harm comes from doing nothing. Sometimes you have to act, even when the odds are impossible. They stood together in silence, watching the ships arrive, waiting to learn their fate. Outside, the galaxy was changing. The secrets were out. The truth was spreading. And humanity, for better or worse, had made its choice. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Lieutenant Kevin Park monitored the situation with growing amazement. Communications flooded in from dozens of species. Messages of support. Questions about what humanity would do next. Offers of alliance from civilizations that had never before dared to speak against the Council. What do we tell them? Ensign Maria Flores asked from her station. Kevin thought about it carefully. Tell them we stand for freedom. Tell them we stand for justice. Tell them that if they believe in these things too, they are welcome to stand with us. The message went out. And the ships kept coming. The Valanthe fleet arrived on the third day. 200 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their black holes absorbing light like holes cut in the fabric of space. Each vessel was massive, armed with weapons that could shatter planets. They surrounded the system in a sphere of death, cutting off all escape routes. Elias watched their arrival from the window of his confined quarters. Grace stood beside him, her face calm despite the terror that must have been churning inside her. "That is a lot of ships," she said quietly. "Yes, they are not taking any chances. Do you think they will really attack? With all these witnesses?" Elias considered the question. Outside the Valanthe blockade, the gathering of young species had grown to over 300 vessels. Most were civilian ships, completely unable to defend themselves. But they had come anyway, drawn by the broadcast, unwilling to look away from this moment in history. "I think Krikstal wants to," he said finally. "But the Council is divided. That gives us time." The door to their quarters opened, and a Valanthe soldier entered. "Captain Morgan, the High Arbiter requests your presence." Requests or demands? The soldier did not answer. Elias straightened his uniform and followed. Grace and the others fell in behind him, but the guard blocked them. Only the captain. "It is all right," Elias told his team. "I will return soon." He walked alone through the winding corridors of the station, surrounded by armed guards who watched his every movement. The grand chamber was empty when he arrived, except for Xyrathon hovering near the central throne. "You wished to speak with me?" Elias asked. "I wish to understand you," Xyrathon replied. "In 50,000 years of guiding this galaxy, I have seen countless species rise and fall. I have watched civilizations bloom and wither, but I have never encountered anything quite like humanity. I am not sure how to take that. It is not meant as praise or criticism. It is simply observation." Xyrathon's crystalline form pulsed with soft light. "When your species first reached the stars, we debated what to do with you. Some wanted to eliminate you immediately. Humans were violent, unpredictable, dangerously creative. Others argued for restriction, which is the path we chose. You treated us like dangerous animals that needed to be caged. We treated you like what you appeared to be. A species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times with nuclear weapons, environmental damage, and endless war. We saw no reason to believe you would behave differently on a galactic scale." Elias felt the truth in those words, even as they stung. Humanity has made mistakes. We have done terrible things to each other. But we have also learned from those mistakes. We have grown. Have you? When I look at what you have done here, I see the same pattern that has defined your entire existence. You encountered a situation that offended your sense of justice. Instead of accepting the reality of galactic politics, you acted impulsively, based on emotion rather than reason. You may have doomed your entire species because you could not tolerate an injustice you had no power to prevent. Elias asked, "I see something different. I see a species that has finally found something worth fighting for beyond our own survival. The Korath were strangers to us. We had nothing to gain by helping them and everything to lose. But we helped them anyway because it was right. Zerthon was silent for a long moment. And if Krixtal destroys your fleet, if he reduces Earth to rubble, will you still believe it was right? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. Because the alternative was to become what you are. A civilization so focused on order that you have forgotten why order matters. You maintain peace, but it is the peace of the grave. You prevent chaos, but you also prevent growth, change, hope. Oh, those are dangerous words. They are honest words. And I think you know they are true, or you would not have brought me here alone to discuss them. Before Zerthon could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The High Arbiter turned to a display that materialized in the air beside him, and Elias saw what was happening. Ships were arriving. Not just more young species, but elder ones. 3 Quarium vessels emerged from a hidden jump point and positioned themselves between the human fleet and the Valanthi Armada. Behind them came 2 Hithroni cruisers, their organic hulls gleaming with bioluminescent patterns. "What is this?" Zerthon demanded, though Elias suspected the question was not directed at him. A communication came through. Sirathanel's voice filled the chamber. "The Quarium invoke the right of witness. We declare these proceedings a matter of galactic significance. Any attack on the gathered vessels will be considered an attack on Quarium interests and will be met with appropriate response." Krixtal's voice crackled over another channel. "You would side with these insects? With these infant species who dare to challenge our authority?" "We side with no one," Sirathanel replied calmly. "We merely observe, but we observe with great interest, and we will not be prevented from witnessing this moment in galactic history." The Hithroni representative spoke next. "The Hithroni Collective declares neutrality in this matter. We will not participate in any military action, nor will we support any sanctions based on the current situation. We suggest the Council reconvene for further deliberation." Elias watched as 2 more elder species announced similar positions. The unified front that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years was crumbling before his eyes. "You have divided us," Zerthon said quietly. "With your broadcasts, your defiance, your impossible stubbornness, you have divided a council that has stood united since before your ancestors learned to make fire." "I did not divide anything. The divisions were already there. The injustices were already happening. The resentment was already building. All I did was shine a light on what was hidden in darkness." "And now what happens?" "Now we talk. Not as master and servant, but as equals. We find a way forward that does not require genocide or submission. We build something new." Zerthon's form flickered with colors Elias could not interpret. "You truly believe this is possible?" "I believe it has to be. Because the alternative is a war that will devastate the galaxy. The Valanthi may be powerful, but they cannot fight everyone at once. And right now, looking at that display, I see the beginning of everyone standing together." The fleet outside had grown to over 500 vessels. Young species and elder ones, military ships, and civilian craft all gathered around the station called Perpetual Accord. They were not attacking. They were not threatening. They were simply there, bearing witness, refusing to look away. "This is unprecedented," Zerthon admitted. "I do not know what happens next." "Neither do I," Elias replied. "But I know that whatever it is, we will face it together. Humanity is good at facing the unknown. We have been doing it since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there." The High Arbiter was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the crystalline shell that contained its energy form seemed to dim slightly, as if a great weight had settled upon it. "Return to your quarters, Captain Morgan. I must consult with the Council, or what remains of it." Elias nodded and turned to leave. At the door, he paused and looked back. "For what it is worth, I believe there is still hope. The galaxy does not have to be the way it has always been. Change is possible. Growth is possible. All it requires is the courage to take the first step." He walked out, leaving the ancient being alone with its thoughts, surrounded by the ghosts of 50,000 years of decisions that had brought them all. To this moment, the standoff continued for 7 more days. During that time, the fleet outside the station grew to over 800 vessels. Species that had never before communicated with each other were sharing frequencies, exchanging stories, discovering that their grievances against the Council were not unique. Elias used the time well. Through encrypted channels that Hannah had established, he coordinated with Kevin on the horizon's edge and with representatives from dozens of other species. What emerged from those conversations was not a military alliance, but something more powerful. It was a shared vision of what the galaxy could become. The Naluri, an aquatic species from the far rim of explored space, told stories of colony worlds seized by the Velanthy under the pretense of environmental protection. The Fenthic beings made of living crystal revealed that their reproduction had been forcibly limited by council decree to prevent them from becoming too numerous. The Korath survivors, safely relocated on a distant world, sent messages of gratitude that brought tears to human eyes. "We are not alone," Grace said during one of their planning sessions. "We were never alone. We just did not know it." "The Council kept us isolated from each other," Samuel observed. "If young species cannot communicate, they cannot organize. They cannot resist." "Till now," Hannah added. "The broadcasts changed everything. For the first time, species across the galaxy can see that the system is not as inevitable as they were taught to believe." Elias listened to his team and felt a strange mixture of hope and terror. They had started something enormous. Whether it would end in liberation or destruction remained to be seen. On the 8th day, he received an unexpected visitor. Sarithanal of the Quarium came to his quarters unannounced, passing through the Velanthy guards as if they did not exist. "I wished to speak with you privately," the ambassador said. "Its bioluminescent patterns cast strange shadows on the walls." "I am honored," Elias replied carefully. "The Quarium do not usually concern themselves with young species. We do not usually need to. But you are not usual. What you have done has forced us to reconsider positions we have held for millennia. And what positions are those?" Sarithanal moved to the window, gazing out at the assembled fleet. "When the Council was formed, it was meant to prevent the wars that had devastated our galaxy. For 10,000 years before its creation, species fought constantly. Entire star systems were destroyed. Billions of beings died. The elder species finally agreed that order was worth any price, including genocide, including difficult decisions that served the greater good. Or so we believed." The ambassador turned back to face Elias. "I am very old, Captain. I was present when the Council made its first rulings. I remember the hope we felt, the certainty that we were building something better. But watching these events unfold, I have begun to wonder if we lost our way somewhere along the path." "What makes you say that?" "When I look at your species, I see reflections of what we once were. Passionate, idealistic, willing to risk everything for principles that older and wiser beings dismissed as naive. We told ourselves that we had evolved beyond such foolishness. Now I wonder if we simply lost something precious." Elias considered his words carefully. "The Quarium invoked the right of witness. You prevented the Velanthy from attacking immediately. Why? Because I wanted to see what would happen. Because part of me hoped that you might succeed where so many others have failed. Because somewhere deep in my ancient heart, I still remember what it felt like to believe that change was possible. And now? What do you believe now?" Sarithnal's lights flickered in complex patterns. "I believe that the galaxy is at a crossroads. The Council can attempt to crush this movement and return to the old ways. Or it can adapt, evolve, become something new. The first path leads to war and destruction. The second path is unknown and frightening. But it is also the only path that offers hope. Will the Quarium support us if it comes to conflict? The Quarium will not fight. That is not our way. But we will not stand aside while genocide is committed either. Our ships will remain between your fleet and the Velanthy. If Crixthal wishes to attack, he will have to go through us first." Elias felt the weight of what was being offered. It was not military alliance, but it was something equally valuable. It was legitimacy. One of the elder species was willing to put themselves in harm's way for the principles humanity had proclaimed. "Thank you," he said simply. "I know this is not easy for your people. Nothing worth doing is easy, Captain. That is a truth your species seems to understand better than most." The following day, Elias requested a formal meeting with the council. Not as an accused criminal, but as a representative of the gathered species seeking dialogue. Xyrathon agreed, perhaps because there were few alternatives left. The chamber was different this time. Instead of 12 thrones arranged in judgment, there was a circular table. Representatives from dozens of species filled the observation galleries. The entire galaxy seemed to be watching. Elias spoke for 3 hours. He talked about human history, about the mistakes his species had made, and the lessons they had learned. He talked about the wars that had nearly destroyed Earth, the moment when humanity had finally understood that cooperation was the only path to survival. He talked about justice and mercy and the belief that every sentient being had inherent worth, regardless of their power or usefulness. "We do not ask to rule the galaxy," he concluded. "We do not ask for special privileges or unearned status. We ask only for a chance to prove that there is another way. That order can exist alongside freedom. That strength can be measured by how we treat the weakest among us, not by how effectively we destroy them." Crixthal responded with fury. "Pretty words from a species that has contributed nothing to galactic civilization. Humanity has no right to lecture its betters. This gathering of malcontents proves only that disorder breeds chaos. The Council should crush this rebellion before it spreads further." "Rebellion against what?" Sarithnel asked calmly. "Against injustice? Against genocide? If the Council can only maintain order through terror, then perhaps the order is not worth maintaining." The debate continued for hours. Species that had never dared to speak against the Council found their voices. Ancient grievances were aired. Hidden truths were revealed. By the end, even some of Crixthal's allies seemed uncertain. Hethroni Prime, who had been silent throughout, finally spoke. Its voice was like wind through ancient trees. "I have listened carefully. I have considered all perspectives, and I have reached a conclusion. The system we have maintained for 50,000 years is dying. We can try to preserve it through force, which will lead to destruction. Or we can help it evolve into something new, which is frightening but necessary. I choose evolution." The words fell like hammer blows. Hethroni Prime was one of the oldest and most respected members of the Council. Its opinion carried enormous weight. Xyrathon turned to Elias. "You have made your case. Now tell us what you propose. If the old system must change, what would you have us build in its place?" Elias looked around the chamber at the faces of 100 species. Some were hostile. Some were curious. Some were hopeful. All were waiting. "I proposed a compact," he said. "Not rule by the strong, but partnership among equals. Not restrictions that keep young species weak, but guidance that helps them grow. Not genocide to manage resources, but cooperation to expand them. A galaxy where every species has a voice, where every civilization has a chance. Where justice is more than just a word spoken by those in power." The chamber fell silent. Outside, the assembled fleet waited. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched their displays, hoping for a future better than the past. "It will not be easy," Elias added. "Change never is. But I believe it is possible, and I believe it is worth trying." Xyrathon's form pulsed with light. "Then let us try." The negotiations lasted for 3 weeks. During that time, the galaxy held its breath. Ships remained in position around perpetual accord, neither attacking nor withdrawing. The old order had not quite ended, and the new one had not yet begun. Everything hung in the balance. Elias worked without rest. He met with representatives from over 70 species, listening to their concerns, incorporating their ideas, building consensus, one conversation at a time. Grace served as his right hand, managing the endless logistics of interspecies diplomacy. Hannah coordinated communications between factions that had never before spoken to each other. Samuel provided medical care to beings from a dozen different biologies, demonstrating through action the principles humanity preached. The document that emerged from these negotiations was called the Compact of Mutual Growth. It was not perfect. No compromise ever is. But it represented something unprecedented in galactic history. A framework for cooperation that did not depend on domination. Under the compact, the restrictions on young species would be gradually lifted. Each civilization would earn expanded rights through demonstrated responsibility. Expansion would be regulated through negotiation rather than decree. Representatives from all species would have voices in galactic governance, weighted by population and contribution, but no longer limited by age or power. Most importantly, genocide was explicitly forbidden. Any species facing extinction would be entitled to protection from the galactic community. The Korath incident would never be repeated. The Volanthi refused to sign. Krixthal declared the compact a surrender to chaos and led his remaining allies into isolation. 6 elder species followed him, forming a coalition dedicated to preserving the old ways within their own territories. But 9 elder species signed the document, along with over 100 young civilizations. It was the largest diplomatic achievement in recorded history. On the day of the signing ceremony, Elias stood in the grand chamber surrounded by beings he had never imagined meeting. The room was filled with representatives from every corner of the galaxy. Some were old enemies learning to become partners. Others were strangers discovering common ground. Zalret Hun approached him as the final signatures were being recorded. "You have done something remarkable, Captain Morgan. You have changed the course of galactic history." "I had help," Elias replied, gesturing to the crowded chamber. "From more beings than I can count?" "True, but change requires a spark. You provided that spark when you chose to save the Korath rather than obey unjust laws. Everything that followed grew from that single choice. I just did what seemed right." "Yes, that is precisely the point. For too long, we who rule have forgotten that simple truth. We became so focused on maintaining order that we lost sight of why order matters. You reminded us." The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for all the species that had been lost under the old system. Elias thought of the Korath children he had rescued, now growing up on a world where they could build their own future. He thought of the countless others who had not been so fortunate. "We cannot change the past," he said quietly, "but we can honor it by building a better future." Grace found him on the observation deck as the fleet began to disperse. Ships were returning to their homeworlds, carrying news of what had happened. The galaxy was changing, and everyone wanted to be part of what came next. "The horizon's edge is ready to depart whenever you are," she said. "Earth is asking for you. Apparently, you are something of a hero back home." Elias smiled warily. "I never wanted to be a hero. I just wanted to do my job. You did more than that. You showed the galaxy what humanity stands for. That is not nothing." They watched the stars together. The same stars Elias had gazed at since childhood. They seemed different now. Not distant and cold, but connected by threads of hope that stretched across light years. "What happens now?" Grace asked. "Now the hard work begins. The compact is just words on a document until we prove it can function. The Volanthi coalition is still out there, hostile and resentful. There will be conflicts, misunderstandings, setbacks. Change does not happen overnight, but it happens. It happens slowly, painfully, but it happens. That is what humanity has always believed, even when the evidence suggested otherwise. We are stubborn that way." Grace laughed softly. "Stubborn enough to change the universe. Something like that." The Horizon's Edge departed perpetual accord 3 days later. As they entered hyperspace, Elias transmitted a message to the fleet that had gathered in humanity's support. "Thank you for standing with us. Thank you for believing that the future can be better than the past. Go home to your families, your worlds, your civilizations. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that change is possible. Tell them that they are not alone. And when the time comes to build the future we have promised, I hope we will stand together again." The responses flooded in, messages of gratitude and hope from 100 species. Elias, read them all. Feeling the weight of responsibility and the lightness of possibility in equal measure. In the years that followed, historians would debate which moment truly changed the galaxy. Some pointed to Ilias's refusal in the Grand Chamber. Others credited the broadcast that shattered the Council's secrecy. Still others focused on the Quarium intervention or the signing ceremony, but those who were there knew the truth. Change happened in 1,000 small moments. Every time a human refused to accept that might makes right, every time they extended a hand to a stranger, every time they chose principle over safety, Captain Elias Morgan retired eventually, returning to Earth to teach at the Academy. His students went on to captain their own ships, to forge their own alliances, to carry humanity's stubborn idealism to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Grace commanded a diplomatic vessel that mediated disputes between species that had never before talked. Samuel established medical stations on frontier worlds, training doctors from dozens of civilizations. Hannah created the Galactic Communications Network, ensuring that no species would ever again be isolated by those in power. The Velanthi's coalition gradually softened over the decades, as they watched other species flourishing under the compact. As their own subject, peoples demanded better treatment. The old hostility faded into grudging acceptance, and eventually something approaching partnership. Crickstyle never apologized. But his successors proved more flexible in the Grand Chamber of Perpetual Accord. A new seat was added to the circle where the Council once sat in judgment. It was smaller than the others, simpler in design. Above it, in the flowing script used for galactic records, was a single word: humanity. Not because humans were old or powerful or dominant, but because they had reminded the galaxy of something that had been forgotten: that courage matters, that principles matter, that even the smallest voice can change the course of history if it speaks truth loudly enough. And when asked what drove him to defy the most powerful organization in known space, Elias's answer was always the same: someone had to stand up. Humanity just happened to be stubborn enough to do it first. But we were never really alone. The desire for justice, for freedom, for a better future that exists in every sentient being. We just gave it a voice. Outside the windows of Perpetual Accord, the stars continued their eternal dance. Ships from 1,000 worlds crossed the vast distances between them, carrying trade and travelers and dreams. The galaxy was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better than it had been, and that was enough. That was everything. The story of Captain Elias Morgan became legend, passed down through